Hi, everybody. Lawyer Autumn Whit Boyd here. Happy day. I am back at you with the latest episode of the Legal Roadmap podcast and our Facebook Live series. And we are starting to wrap up the end of 2020. I know some of you may be very delighted about that. We're ready to say goodbye and good riddance to 2020. And if you are anything like me, you are probably starting to prepare for 2021. So maybe you're doing some forecasting. Hopefully you're doing a budget. And I think a lot of us, especially if we're newer in business, we maybe aren't setting out a budget. We're just kind of spending here willy-nilly. But I'm going to encourage you, and we're doing this here at the AWB firm, to look at what 2020 has looked like. Maybe it's been a weird year, but we don't know what 2021 is going to look like. And try and forecast, both your income and your expenses based on what happened in 2020. If you're hoping for an increase in one, you're probably going to have at least a little increase in the other. And if there were any unexpected expenses that maybe you didn't plan for, maybe you can plan for those a little bit better next time. I would put legal in that category. I think a lot of us don't have a line item in our budget for legal, but as we grow our businesses, especially if you're scaling this year or next year, it really is a cost of doing business. You need to think about it. You need to plan for it. It is, we have to pull up our big girl panties, as I like to say, and do things the right way. Legal is part of that. So having a line item, just like you do for your tax advisor or any other professional advisors, if you work with a business coach or do other training, I would put legal in that same category. It's just something you need to plan for so that it's not a surprise. Hopefully you have a very calm year legally, but you should probably be doing some proactive things legally every year as well. So today's episode is going to walk you through the 4 stages of business. And I'm kind of looping back to the beginning of this season, back to January of 2020, when I had several episodes on the different phases of business. So if you did not listen to those, now is a great time to go back. This is airing Thanksgiving week here in the United States. So you may have some travel, or you may just have some downtime. Maybe you're taking some long walks or doing some stuff around the house. I know we're planning on putting up our Christmas decorations, which I'm really excited about. And I often do that after my kids go to bed and with listening to a podcast. This is a great time to binge. Those episode numbers are 120, 121, 122, and 123. So 120 through 123. If you want to go back, I went really in detail in each of those episodes about the different phases. So I have an episode for each phase. Very briefly, the launch phase is what we call the first phase of business. So this is when you're not yet started or just getting started. You're really brand new in business. The second stage is what we're calling the solopreneur phase. So that's you're making anywhere from $0 to up to $50,000. These are all approximate ranges. But in general, you're doing everything. You don't have a team. And that's, your revenue range there. The third stage is what we call the success stage. So things are really starting to groove. You are kind of cooking with gas. This is maybe about 50,000 annual revenues to the low 6 figures, and maybe you have a small team, maybe it's contractors, maybe you have 1 employee. But that's what we call the success phase. And then the fourth phase, which is really where you're kind of more established and then growing, is the scale to CEO stage. So this is mid 6 figures to 7 plus. You've got a regular team of employees. You probably also work with contractors. Things are much more complicated. So again, there's an episode on each of those phases. But what we're going to talk about today is what could you maybe skip as you are budgeting for legal, and what are some things you absolutely cannot skip, and what are some general pricing kind of to think about as you're plugging those numbers into your budget. So in the launch phase, this is, again, not yet started or just getting started. You're brand new. Maybe you do have kind of a startup budget. Maybe you're still working a day job, or you maybe have a loan or some funds that you're setting aside from your personal money, and you're trying to figure out what's it going to cost to start up the business. So I would say skip custom contracts in the beginning. I would skip really anything time intensive that's going to be really expensive working with a lawyer. And I know I may get some flack about this, and that is just fine. I have no problem with that. But my thought is I work with a lot of new businesses. I see them all day long. I talk with a lot of new business owners, and it is very easy to spend money on things that once you actually get into your business, you may change things. You may find out, I was going to be a life coach, but I actually hate that. Now I'm going to be a marketing consultant. There's so much experimentation. There's so many changes that happen in that first year or two of business when you're just kind of throwing a lot of spaghetti at the wall, trying to see what sticks. And it's very easy to spend a lot of money on legal protections that it turns out you don't need 6 months later. So I would skip custom contracts. Now, I don't think you should skip contracts altogether, but in this phase, contract templates that you customize yourself. So make sure you're getting a template from someone reputable. Plug for the AWB firm. We have awesome contract templates that are specifically created for online businesses. So I would purchase a template from someone who understands the kind of business you're trying to build. You may change in a couple months, but the nice thing is contract templates are not super expensive. Ours regular price are $299 each, $299. Very affordable, even if you're just getting started. So that's what I would recommend. And I would focus on the areas of your business where you're dealing with other people. Usually it's gonna be clients or customers where you're making money. So of course, there are tons of contracts that you could put in place, but I want you to focus and maybe skip some of the other ones. Focus on how you're making your revenue. 2 other things I would skip, and I'm going to give a caveat at the end of this section. Oh, and I forgot my standard disclaimer. So I'm Autumn Witt-Boyd. I am a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer if you're watching or listening to this. So please take this just as information. It is not meant to be legal advice. For all of these stages, if you have individual questions that you need to have answered, it's absolutely worth talking with an attorney. Maybe you can find someone who will do a consult for an hour or 2, help you kind of get started, answer your individual questions, make sure you get real legal advice that is customized and personalized to you. All right, so the other 2 things that I see a lot of new businesses doing that I don't think are necessarily needed or required are registering trademarks. So that's very expensive. And also, again, what I talked about with people changing and pivoting and trying out one thing and then deciding they want to do something else. I see this a lot with business owners who think they have this brilliant name for a product or a service or their business. They get really excited about the name. They want to protect it. But then in 6 months, they're doing something different and the name doesn't fit. And so just to give you an idea of the cost of a trademark registration, if you're registering on your own, which I don't recommend, but lots of people do it. If you're registering it on your own, you still are going to pay filing fees. Those are government fees to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. And I'm just talking about federal registrations too. There are state registrations, but I'm not going to get into that. They're less expensive, but still. So at the federal level, just for the privilege of filing a trademark application, you're going to pay at least $225 in filing fees. That's for one kind of category of products or services. You have to tell the USPTO what you're going to be selling under your trademark. That can go up very quickly if you're selling a lot of different things under a particular brand. So a couple $100s in filing fees. If you work with an attorney, that's going to go up. There's a big range there. If you're working with someone who's basically just filling out the form with you, that may just be a couple $100s. If you're working with a full service firm like ours that really takes it off your plate, handles the whole process start to finish, it's probably going to be a couple $1,000s. And that can go up if it's a really complicated situation. So just as you're thinking about that, I don't know that that's money you need to spend in this startup launch phase when you may change very quickly. The other thing, and again, I've got a caveat coming, so don't throw no haters yet, is setting up an LLC or a corporation. Now, this is it's not super expensive. Again, you're going to have some state filing fees wherever you're located, your business. Your business has to have a home, so you have to choose a state where you're going to set it up. There are some filing fees. And then if you work with a lawyer, it could be anywhere from a couple $100s to thousands of dollars. Again, depending on how complicated everything is. If you've got a lot of owners and complicated compensation structures and all those things, that's going to be more expensive. But the reason I say to maybe skip this as you're just getting started is there are fees. It's not free. And the reason you set up an LLC or a corporation is kind of twofold. So the first thing, what I think about is legally. This is going to kind of create a fence around your business so that anything that goes wrong in the business that you get sued for, only the business can get sued. Only the business's property or assets can be taken if something goes really wrong. This could be if you're hosting a live event and someone slips and falls and hurts themselves, or if you're teaching a yoga class and someone, again, does something wrong and hurts themselves. If you're a life coach or a business consultant, maybe you give some advice that someone takes and things go wrong. So when we think about things that can go wrong, with most online businesses, especially in the beginning phases, those risks are pretty low. Most of us are not doing live events right away. Most of us are not meeting people in person at our office. We probably don't even have an office in this stage. So our risks are very low. Now, here's where my caveats are going to come in. Oh, well, I'll tell you, the flip side of that, the second consideration with forming an LLC or corporation is there can be tax advantages. I don't give tax advice, so talk to your CPA about that. But those tax advantages generally are going to kick in the next phases of business that I'm going to be talking about. So when there's more revenue, when there's some profit, then maybe you can get some tax advantages by setting up that separate entity. Okay, so here's all my caveats about all of these things that I told you maybe you don't need to do right away, which is, if this is not your first rodeo, if you have a track record, you have run successful businesses before, maybe this is your third or fourth business, you maybe have some substantial investment that you're going to make, maybe you've got cash cushion that you're going to invest, you're going to do really nice branding, you are ready to hit the ground running, you've already got an audience. Some of those things might change some of this analysis. So I always look at legal kind of proportionately to the risk and to what could go wrong. So if you're making a $100,000 investment in a new business, you may still be in this launch phase, but that is a very different analysis than someone who's kind of bootstrapping and doing everything herself and, really making no money, but also not investing much money. It's mostly time and energy that you're investing. Those are two pretty different scenarios. So if you are in I've done this before, I've got some significant investment, or maybe you've got some outside investment, that may change this analysis. Most of the people listening are not in that camp, but I always just want to say that if you fall in that camp, you're probably closer to maybe the success or the scale to CEO phase that I'm going to talk about in a minute when we think about what you need to do and maybe what you can skip. All right, so to recap, in the launch phase, I recommend that you skip custom contracts and a bunch of other custom legal services, registering a trademark, and setting up an LLC or a corporation. Come at me. I'm happy to discuss this. If you guys have questions or want to talk about this, our Legal Roadmap Facebook group is a great place to do that. I'm in there. My team is in there. We pop in and we have great discussions. So if you have questions about any of this, that is great. Okay, so the second phase that we're going to talk about today is the solopreneur phase. So this is, again, you're making $0 to $50,000 annual revenue and you don't have a team. You're doing everything yourself. Maybe you've got, a contractor here and there to help you with very small projects, but nobody ongoing. All right. So again, I still think at this stage, you can skip custom contracts and most expensive legal, protections and work. Your revenues are still pretty low. You're probably not taking home much money. And again, your risks are pretty low. Generally for an online business. That's kind of what I'm thinking about. My web designers, my graphic designers, my coaches, my course creators, that's kind of who I'm talking to. So templates are still a great place to start for this solopreneur phase. But here's what I would add as kind of the next level now that you're growing a little bit. Maybe you're in year 2 or 3. You need to review them and update them at least once or twice a year. Or if you make a big change in how you're doing things, I'll give an example. Here at the AWB firm, we're about to make a big change in how we start working with clients, our kind of beginning engagement. So on my task list this week is to look at our engagement letter. That's our contract. I know that the contract we've been using is not going to be a good fit because we're doing things a little bit differently. So I've set aside, an hour or two on my calendar later next week, and I'm going to go through it and update it. It's not a huge lift. Once you do the initial setup, it's not a huge task to go through and update things. But if you are making a shift, kind of keep in the back of your mind as you're thinking I've got to write launch copy and I've got to, set up a new sales page. Think also, I need to update my contract. And at this stage of your business, I want you to really focus on protecting your revenue stream. So you're starting to make some money. You're starting to hopefully figure out what you enjoy, what your clients like, and we want to protect those revenue streams as they're growing. So here's what can go wrong if you are not doing this. This is why I don't want you to skip this. You're probably seeing bigger client engagements. So what can go wrong? The client doesn't pay. You could have scope creep. This is something I feel like in every industry, scope creep is a problem. If you're doing any kind of services work, having a demanding client or a disagreement about what was included in your package, unhappy clients who maybe are demanding refunds. If you have a contract in place, it's going to address all of these things that I'm talking about. So I'll go ahead and spoil it. That's why I'm talking about all these things. This is why you need a contract. But if you are still pretty new in business, maybe you haven't had things go wrong yet. And I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that's true for you. But I will tell you, the longer you're in business, I was actually just talking with a friend last week, and she was talking about her wedding vendor. She's a wedding vendor, and she laughed and said, her contract was a page or two to start with, and now it's 6 pages. And she said, there's a bride's name on every clause. Every time something went wrong, she added it to the contract. So client ghosting you in the middle of a project or delaying your schedule, confusion about who owns the rights to the work, so intellectual property issues, what they can do with your work. If you just have a terrible client and you want to fire them, does your contract cover that? For my coaches and consultants, maybe somebody takes your advice and something goes wrong. How does that work? Or they're just disappointed in your results. They didn't get what they thought they were going to get. Or someone takes your worksheets or materials and uses them with their own clients or sells them and competes against you. These are all things that you may face sooner or later. So it's really critical as your business grows that you take care of them with a solid agreement. For my course creators, my digital product creators, again, as your business is growing, you're going to have maybe higher pricing. You're definitely going to have more volume, more students. So what can go wrong? Defaults on payment plans, refund requests and chargebacks, having issues if you've got a private community, a Facebook group, a Mighty Networks group, a bulletin board. Anytime people get together, people can behave badly. So you want to make sure you've got some rules around that. Or what if you want to use your students' feedback or comments in your testimonials or in marketing, and you want to make sure you're doing that the right way. So solution to all of this is having a really solid contract. And again, I think a template can work great at this point. awbfirm.com. We've got all of the ones that you could need for your online business. I still think at this stage, so again, we're talking like $0 to $50,000 revenue, maybe year 2 or 3. I still think it's a little early for a trademark registration or a copyright registration. So copyright is going to protect your content. So think blog posts, your online course materials. If you're a consultant, you may have worksheets or things that you use, or a coach, you may have things you use with your one-on-one clients or with your group. So all of that content that you're creating, your videos, your podcasts, all the things, that's what copyright protects. I still think it's a little early to spend money on those because your risk of someone copying them is pretty low. And your ability to enforce those rights, frankly, is also pretty low because it's expensive to file a lawsuit. You're probably not going to do that. But I do recommend that you go ahead and protect yourself. Start using the TM and the copyright, that C in a circle symbol. Start letting people know that you are kind of planting your flag in the sand, that you claim, that catchy name to your product or your business that you came up with. Put that TM after it where you're using it, or your logo if you have a really beautiful logo, or if you have content that is really precious to you, put that C in a circle, that copyright notice, and put your company name and maybe the words all rights reserved. There's some simple things that you can do without spending a bunch of money. And again, at this stage, when we're thinking about budget, really your biggest investment is probably going to be a couple of contract templates. So I think a line item for maybe $1,000 a year is going to cover you. And then maybe if something pops up where you have questions or you need to have a consult with a lawyer, you would have a little cushion to maybe do that as well. At this point, I think it's still a little early for an LLC or corporation, but you might start to think about it. This is when I want you to kind of start having some of these things on your radar. Maybe if you have been filing your taxes on your own, this is a great time to meet with a CPA. You're still early enough that maybe you don't want them to prepare your tax return, but maybe you just want to, sit down and talk some things out with them, or ask, are there any tax advantages? Am I getting to the point where we need to kind of put this on the radar? And then if you know that, then you can start budgeting for that LLC or corporation setup. All right, moving to the success phase. This is where it really gets fun. Because you're rocking and rolling. You are, maybe still a little bit overwhelmed, but you're starting to have people on your team to help you. Again, this is about 50,000 to low 6 figures revenue-wise annual. And this is where the list of things you can skip is going to get shorter, because this is when it's time to start doing things the right way. It's time to start, hopefully you are budgeting at this phase, and it's time to start putting a little bit more money on that legal line item so that you can be prepared, do some proactive things, but also this is when, maybe you have someone threaten to sue you, or a copycat or a collaboration that goes wrong. So this is where we want to just have a little money in the budget that we have kind of put aside in case something goes wrong. The longer you're in business, the more likely it is that something is going to go wrong. It's not if, it's when. And I hate to say that, but again, it's just a cost of doing business. You are reaping all of the rewards of the flexibility and the empowerment that comes with owning your own business. This is just one of the costs, like paying your taxes that comes with doing that. You got to do things the right way. All right, so at this point, I would say, now let's start to consider a custom contract. I wouldn't do it for everything, but maybe for your number one revenue source. And when we're thinking about dollar amounts here, it's going to vary widely depending on who you're working with. At our firm, a custom contract is generally $2,000 to $4,000. It just depends. on how complicated it is. But that's a good number to kind of start with. I know that may seem like a lot of money. There may be other ways that you can do it less expensively, but I do think it's time to start talking with a lawyer, especially if you've had some tricky situations, and see how maybe you can put some protections in place to avoid those in the future. We want to incorporate all those lessons learned. So like my friend who was saying all of the clauses in her contract have a bride's name on it. You may have client situations that have come up, and that needs to be added into your contract in a way that you're sure is just rock solid, because you have more money at issue now. Your risks are getting higher because you have a team. You're probably dependent on that income now for your family, for your personal expenses. Maybe you've quit your job and this is your sole income at this point, or maybe you have a partner who has quit their job and come to work with you. This is when things are starting to get really real. So we want to start doing things the right way. I also suggest at this phase that you maybe sit down and consult with an attorney about your team. So whether you are still working with contractors, whether you're thinking about bringing on an employee or you've already done that, you want to make sure that you're doing things the right way when it comes to team. I'm not going to get into that because we have several episodes. Go listen to, I'm going to mention 3, and we'll put these in the show notes. So if you're on a podcast player, you can just click. Episode 91, episode 49, and episode 37 are all about working with independent contractors the right way. And how that's different than working with an employee and what you might need to think about there. So go listen to those. But as your team grows and as you have more revenue, you are more of a target for if something goes wrong with one of your team members and they're unhappy with you, to either be sued, be reported to a federal or state agency for doing things the wrong way. This is just a bigger risk. So you want to make sure you're doing that the right way. Here at the AWB firm, that is something we are working with almost all of our larger and retainer clients on, is team issues. We just had a call with one of our quarterly retainer clients today, and they are getting close to 20 employees. And so that means there's all kinds of federal laws that start to kick in at different numbers of employees. So we keep an eye on that. And if you are anywhere near that and you do not already have an attorney working with you, I'm just going to put a bug in your ear that it is past time. You need to get started. Okay, you also may have other contracts that you need to add. And for other things, templates may still work at this time. I really think you need a custom contract at this phase for whatever your core revenue source is. So whether that's an online course, whether that's one-on-one work with clients or a group coaching program, whatever that looks like for your main revenue source, I think a custom contract is a great idea at this point. But templates may still work for some of the other things that are lower risk. So working with your independent contractors, again, I think you should be talking with a lawyer at this point, making sure you're complying, because the rules are very different in different states about that. But you may be able to start with a template and then just kind of customize it. If you have an affiliate program to promote your stuff, or if you are an affiliate for someone else, that may be something where a template could work. Anytime you're collaborating, so if you're doing guest blog posts or having people come on your platform and do a guest blog post, or podcast interviews, or if you've got guest contributors to your online course or guest experts in a group program, all of those things I highly recommend that you have contracts around, and those are things that are very easy to use a template for. At this stage, I do suggest, this is, again, we're starting to take things more seriously. We're starting to put more protections in place. I do think this is the time when it's time to consider a trademark registration for your main brand. Think of what is your moneymaker? What would absolutely feel like a knife in the heart if you saw that someone had copied you, or really impact your revenue if they started stealing all your traffic. If someone's Googling your catchphrase or something and they're landing on someone else's website, or they're confused, they're not sure which one is the real program that they're looking for. That's when we want to think about a trademark registration. And again, as you're thinking about your line item, this is going to be anywhere from a couple $100 if you're doing it yourself to a couple $1,000 probably if you're working with a lawyer, which I recommend because there's a lot of kind of trap doors during the registration process. And I talk with clients, actually I'm working on today, where they look at the online form at the USPTO. It seems pretty straightforward. They fill it out and then they get a denial from the USPTO. And it's some issue that wasn't even on their radar, that they didn't even know that they had done wrong. Sometimes we can fix that and sometimes we can't. So it is well worth, if you're going to spend a couple $100 on the filing fees, I recommend just kind of saving your pennies for a little bit until you can afford to work with an attorney and make sure that you do it the right way. Otherwise, it's kind of like lighting $100 bills on fire, because there are a lot of things you can screw up. You do not get those filing fees back. You may have to start over. That's what we're kind of talking about with one of our clients that we're working with. We're going to try and fix it, but we may not be able to. So there is a cost to doing things the wrong way. Again, you don't need this for everything. So you can probably skip it for a lot of things that you might be tempted to register your trademark on. Even at, the last stage that we're going to talk about, none of us have unlimited resources or time. There's also time that goes into some of this. So you don't need to register everything. You may still not need to register your logo. Again, think about what would be confusing to other people if someone stole it, or what would really damage your business if someone was copycatting you. This is the time you really need to be thinking about an LLC or a corporation. Again, you've got more risk, you've got more to protect. You want to be talking with a CPA. You probably may even be able to get some tax advantages, especially if you have a team and other expenses that you're dealing with. This is the time when that is more important. So you definitely need to be connecting with a CPA or a tax advisor at this point. And I will close out this phase by saying, if you can't tell already, I think this phase is when, especially as you get closer to that mid 6-figure annual revenue mark, it is time for a legal audit of your business. You just don't know what you don't know. And every business is different. It's time to go ahead and form a relationship with an attorney so that when things pop up, because they will, it's not if, it's when at this point, you will have someone you can turn to who can hop in really quickly. I know I keep talking about what we've been working on because we're really busy. We've got a lot of projects that we're working on. But I have a client that we worked on a pretty major business collaboration for her about a year ago. And things have kind of gotten complicated recently. And so she came to me with some new issues around the intellectual property that we had worked on. And because we'd already worked together, I already knew her business. I already knew the details of this collaboration. We were able to hop in very quickly and really hit the ground running. There was no kind of getting up to speed time. And that was really valuable to her. If I had said, oh, it's going to be 2 weeks before I can get to this and I mean, as your business grows, you really need someone on your team that you can pull in when you have those unexpected things happen so that they can help you deal with them. So a legal audit is a great idea, going ahead and starting to get a relationship with a lawyer or a law firm who can understand your business, knows how it works, and can help. All right, last phase, scale to CEO. So this is mid 6 figures to 7+. I am not going to tell you much to skip here. Honestly, you should really have a line item in your budget. I don't want to say 1% of your annual revenues, but at this point, you should probably be budgeting, maybe $5,000 to $10,000 a year at least for legal, because there are going to be some proactive things you should be doing, and there are going to be things that pop up that are unexpected. The only expected thing is you're going to have something. You just don't know what it is. You really need a lawyer on call at this stage. You should really be having a legal audit at least once a year, talking about all the new things you're doing. I joke sometimes when we have our retainer calls, I'm like, tell me all the new things you're doing that you didn't think I needed to know about. And then we almost always find something that they just hadn't considered might have a legal implication. So regular meetings at least once a year, probably more like quarterly or twice a year, is just an absolute must. And at this stage, you probably need custom contracts for most things. Templates may still work for some of your lower risk areas, but even if you are purchasing a template and customizing it yourself, you may want your lawyer to just lay their eyes on it. Make sure you've done it the right way, because again, we've got more money, we've got more team members, we've got bigger engagements, we've just got more risk, we've got a higher profile, more things can go wrong. You are also going to want, thinking of having a lawyer on call. For our retainer clients, we've really I joke that we've trained them, but they just send everything to us. All the contracts that people ask them to sign, they have us look at. And I am amazed sometimes at the things that people are asking my clients to sign. They are crazy. Think about vendors you're hiring. So if you're doing videos for your course, you hire a videographer, or you're doing a guest expert and they want you to sign their contract. You really want someone who can make sure that your interests are being protected in those kinds of relationships. So having someone to review it, often that's just like a 30-minute review. It's not super complicated unless we're having a lot of back and forth and we're saying like, oh, this is a mess. We really need to start over. But often it's just like, ask if they can change this sentence, or like, this paragraph is not great. I want you to think about this. We've had several clients this year that we've helped with book deals. They were talking to agents or they were talking with publishers. You just really need someone on your side for those kinds of things to help you negotiate. You will miss things just because you are not a lawyer. You didn't go to law school. So it's not your fault. But this is where you really need that professional expertise at this stage in your business. trademark registrations. So this is an absolute must at this stage for your most profitable things. And also, especially if you have a high profile, for your new offers. So for a lot of our clients who are at that like 5 to 10 million annual revenue phase, we will file trademark applications before they launch new things because they are just such targets for copycats that we don't want to open the door, as soon as they launch for somebody else to hop in line in front of them at the US Patent and Trademark Office. We want them to have first dibs. And sometimes that means registering even before they've launched. Now, if you're a brand new business, I don't think that's necessary because nobody's watching you. There's kind of some benefits to having a lower profile. But as you are growing at this stage of your business, trademark registrations, protecting your brand, making sure that the copycats are not stealing your traffic, your audience, is absolutely critical. You've got a really high risk there. This is also where I want my clients to start thinking about copyright registrations. So for all that content that you've been creating over the years, you don't necessarily have to register everything, but I want you again to think about what are your most profitable things? What are your money makers? So it might be your key course, or maybe you have some materials that you use in your coaching engagements. Think about that first. Now, the good thing about copyright, we didn't talk about costs there. It's much less expensive than trademarks. So the filing fee is less, it's $65. I still think if you're at this phase, you should be having a lawyer help you with this, but I'm not going to be super mad if you do it on your own because the form is pretty easy. There's some mistakes you can make, but the consequences aren't as bad. They'll generally let you fix them. So if it's a question of I'm going to register it myself or not at all, I would rather you register it yourself. If you're working with our law firm, we charge a flat fee for that. So it's pretty predictable for us. So, maybe a couple $100 to $1,000 or more if it's, again, depending on how complicated it is. If you tell me you've got 12 different people who collaborated on something, I've got to sort out a bunch of the rights and make sure that we've got all the ducks in a row before we file it. But generally, it's not a super heavy lift to do a copyright registration. So for your core offers, for your money makers, I want you to be thinking about copyright registrations at this phase. And also, as I mentioned, putting that TM or the C in a circle, planting your flag in the sand and telling people I own this. LLC or corporation, absolutely necessary at this phase. You've got way too much risk not to be taking that protection seriously. And also, you should have a CPA that you're speaking with or tax advisor on a regular basis to help you with planning. And then team. This is really the phase, as I mentioned, we're working with a lot of our clients on team stuff. Especially for my clients who have what we call distributed teams. So they may have 6 virtual employees in 6 different states. You have to comply with all 6 of those states' employment laws. And it is just, there's some research that needs to be done there. There's probably some things that you don't even know about. Some states require paid time off or disability or pregnancy leave, or there's all kinds of different requirements in different places. So you really need to have a legal team at this point in your business, making sure that you're doing that the right way. Because again, you're a target for a disgruntled employee to leave and say, hey, you didn't have workers' comp insurance, or you weren't registered with unemployment. And there's just all kinds of things that can get really messy with really serious fines. You could have years of back pay if you are paying someone as a contractor who really should have been classified as an employee. It gets really expensive. So I know when I say budget $5,000 to $10,000 or more a year, that is a drop in the bucket compared to the fines and fees that you could have to pay if you do this the right way, the wrong way. We want to do this the right way. So again, at this stage of business, I really think it's time at this stage of business to have a lawyer who can help you prioritize, though, because there are still some things that I have calls with my $10 million annual revenue clients, and I'm like, we can wait on that. Or, you don't really need that. Maybe it's some shiny thing that one of their friends did that they think might be a good idea. And I say, you know what, for your business, we don't really need to do that. So it's not that you have to do every single legal thing, even at this stage of business. There's always prioritization and, making sure that it's in alignment with what you're doing and what your values are and what you care about. So having a lawyer kind of help you figure that out at this stage is a really good idea. All right, so we have a handout for each of these 4 stages of business. And you can get those on our website on the show notes page. You can also click if you're in a podcast player. Those are at awbfirm.com/podcast166. That will go live when the podcast goes live. If you're watching on Facebook Live before that, I'll drop another place that you can get those in the comments. But head on over to the show notes page. You can get all the resources I mentioned, links to the other episodes I mentioned, and those handouts for what you should be doing at each stage. But I hope this was helpful in thinking through your budget, thinking about what maybe you can skip, what you need to prioritize, what can maybe wait a little bit. Let me know how it's going. If you're working on a legal budget, if you have a question about something we didn't talk about, I'm happy to give you just, some monetary ranges or ideas of what something might cost. So hope that you guys, if you're in the US, hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving later this week and some time off. If you're somewhere else, hope you have a nice week heading into the holiday season. I will talk to you guys soon.